When you're comping and playing jazz chords, you don't want to play the complete full chords all the time. That's gonna sound a little bit boring. You wanna change things up, have more dynamic range, and be able to maybe just lean back a little bit. And a great way to do that is to use intervals and small voice leading ideas. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can start working with that. And this is something that you can add to your playing and just give you a lot more dynamic range in the way that you play chords. Something that works well for your comping, but also for your solos and your chord melody arrangements. My name is Jens Larsen. Learn jazz, make music. I'm going to start with a really solid mainstream comping example, and then I'm going to open up that sound and use those same concepts to show you how you can make some interesting sounds with different interval and voice leading and also some pentatonic scale ideas. This is the basic 2/5, all drop 2 voicings, sounds solid, really clear. Of course, this is the kind of stuff you want to play, but maybe you don't want to play like that the entire song. Maybe you want to have another sound in there as well. So the first thing to do is maybe just to take these voicings and then just look at what you can do with them in terms of just reducing the notes and still getting the sound of the chords across in this context. So here I'm only playing intervals. I'm only playing 2 notes at a time actually. And I took, instead of playing the entire voicing, I took sort of the most characteristic interval, which is the 3rd and the 9th. So we have this sound. And then moving the melody down to G7 flat 9, which is then the flat 9 and the 3rd, up to the sharp 9, resolving to a C major 7, which in this case is the major 7 and the 5th. And then moving the major 7 down to the 6th, and then moving in and also having an E in there. Another example that's also derived from the drop 2 voicings and which focuses a little bit more on rhythm sounds like this. The first interval I'm using here is just the 3rd and the 5th on the first chord, so the F and the A, and then I'm really just harmonizing a melody with thirds, taking me up to the flat 9 sound on the G7 flat 9, moving that up, adding the F in there, and then resolving to the 3rd and the 9th on the C major 7, and then I'm adding in the 5th and the 6th. This topic was a little bit tricky to get into a video, mostly just because it's actually kind of advanced, and especially if you want to explain all the theory and all the different rules there are for moving voices, then it gets really long and also kind of boring. So instead what I went with was really working with some examples and just giving you some options, some things to start working with, and that way you can explore it yourself. I think that works a lot better, and that's actually also how I've learned it myself. When you comp, you want to add some melody to how you're playing. That's really what's going to tie the whole thing together. But you don't want to use block harmony to harmonize everything, because that's going to get too heavy and too full and not really work behind a soloist. So if you're just using intervals behind the soloist, then that works a lot better. Something like this. So here first it's just a D minor voicing, and then to make it a little bit lighter, then I'm only playing intervals on the moving part that follows it. So moving to the G7 flat 9 with just this F and A flat, but then I'm building the rest of the voicing around that to this G7 flat 9 flat 13, and then resolving to this very complicated looking chord with a complicated name, which is an F sharp diminished with a flat 6 and sus 4. But of course, really, I mean, if you have to analyze it, then that's the name you're going to come up with. But I'm really just looking at that I want to resolve to this, which is a C6-9, and then I'm just moving the voices away so that I have something that's just going to fall into place. And this way of coming up with other voicings is something that's really great, and you don't really have to think about what this is. You just have to know that it's going to resolve. In this example, I'm using the intervals both on the D minor and on the G7 altered chord. So first, just the D minor 7 voicing, then these third intervals just to move the melody a little bit, down to G7, flat 13. And then here I'm playing this melody, which is of course really easy to play on the G7 altered. Resolving to this third interval, which is just C and E, And then I'm sort of building the chord of the C major 7 under that as well. So adding the 7th and the 6th. When you want to try to work on getting concepts like this into your playing, then I wouldn't approach it being really systematic, because there are simply just too many different variations possible, and you have to check out all sorts of stuff in all positions and all types of intervals with all types of voicings. That's probably not going to lead anywhere. I think this is the kind of thing you want to explore just locally. Just look at something that you often play and try to add something to it, try to see what's available around it. And there are a few different ways you can do this. For instance, if you take a D minor voicing like this one and you want to use some third intervals around that, then play the voicing and then see what's available around that voicing and try to use that, try to come up with some stuff that combines these intervals with this voicing. Another thing that's really useful to do is to just take a simple interval that you think, okay, this will work for this chord. So for instance, if we take D minor 7, now if I want to take this through a 2-5-1, then I could do this for the 2, then this for the 5, so we have flat 9. And then I think the most logical thing to do is probably to resolve down here, maybe add a little bit of voice leading, a little bit movement, and then have the 6 in there as well. And you probably also want to spend some time where you're really working on trying to move the voices separately. Really think of, if you're playing only 2 notes, they're 2 separate voices. What can happen if you play them? So if I play a D minor 7 like this, and then move the top voice, then I really have a lot of things happening here. And it's not only the top voice that's moving, it's also melodic movement in the lower voices. And that makes it a lot more interesting and really adds a complete different dimension to how you work with chords and how you play chords. Let's look at how you can use some 6 intervals and some pentatonic scale tricks. So here I'm first just stating the basic D minor 7 with this voicing. Then I'm playing a short melody that's harmonized with 6 intervals. And they are really useful because, like the third interval, they work really well for just harmonizing simple melodies, and they don't sound sort of strange. If you do this with a 4th interval or a 5th interval, then that's going to sound a little bit weird. So like this, they just work really well for harmonizing stepwise melodies. Then I'm moving to the G7 flat 9, which is the flat 9 and the root, down to the 7th, resolving to C major 7. And then I'm adding this fill that's coming out of the E minor pentatonic scales. I'm using E minor pentatonic scale on the C major 7. And the fill is, it's really just 2 voices playing down the scale. And the position I'm playing is this one. And then I'm playing, and then adding a short fill to just sort of fill in the rest of the voices. And then I have this C6-9, actually C major 7 with a 13. And playing simple patterns like this in a pentatonic scale is something that's really efficient. And of course, on an E minor pentatonic scale like this, you can use this on a C major 7, on a G7, on an A7 or an E minor chord. And that's really well worth checking out, and that would be an exercise like this. Let's look at an example where I'm harmonizing some arpeggios and then using a different type of pentatonic pattern. So first D minor 7, just a D minor 7 voicing with a 9. And then I'm playing this A minor triad, but I'm harmonizing it with third intervals. So going to the G7 flat 13, which really just means moving this down and then adding the F. Then we get just a full G7 altered. And then C major 7 with a 9. And then here I'm adding another type of pentatonic, E minor pentatonic pattern, where I'm first playing these 2 notes and then these 2. And that's also, again, just using string sets and making a really simple pattern that's moving down the pentatonic scale. So And then the same thing on the next string set, which really just gives me sort of the 3rd and the 7th of the C. And of course you can also check out this exercise through the entire position, so that would be something like. In this case, the exercise doesn't maybe always sound that great in the lower register, also because we get these kind of intervals, which are nice when you're up here, but maybe down here not that beautiful. But it's just nice to have these options in there, and you never know what you can use them for. Again, this will work on a lot of different chords, like E minor and C major 7, or even an A minor chord, or maybe a G7 chord. This example is treating the chords as if they have 2 layers, where there are really sort of a conversation between the 2 different layers. So first we just get the D minor voicing, and then a short melody that's harmonized in thirds. And then on the G7 also at first I play the sharp 9, the B flat, then the response to that just fills in the chords, but also works as a short melody. Then the top note melody moves again from the sharp 9 to the flat 9, resolving to the 7th, and then you get another response that's also just filling in the chord around the C major 7. When you're working with comping and chords and you're thinking more about the individual voices and trying to play some nice melodies, and actually in all the different voices, then it's really useful to not have really large voicings to work with, because they're much more flexible. And 3-note jazz chords are probably the most flexible ones to check out. And if you want to dig into that a little bit more, then check out this video where I'm going over a lot of info on different types of 3-note jazz voicings.